Nabanja, Prime Minister of the Republic of Uganda and Chair of the 11th session, the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. Her Excellency Ambassador Salma Malika Haddadi, Deputy Chairperson of the Africa Union Commission. Her Excellency Ms. Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. His Excellency Ambassador Bob Ray, President of the 2025 session of the Economic and Social Council, who will be joining us shortly. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, Police, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this high-level ministerial meeting, and particularly Africa Day at the 2025 High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. As you're aware, Africa Day at HLPF was first launched in 2018 as an annual platform for African member states and partners to share good practices, innovations, and lessons learned in overcoming the multifaceted challenges that continue to shape our development trajectories. Since its inception, this forum has become a vital space for dialogue, reflection, and coordination around the implementation and monitoring of both the United Nations 2030 Agenda and the African Union's Agenda 2063. Today's convening is also a timely opportunity to amplify Africa's voice on the global stage and to strengthen the critical link between regional and global efforts to accelerate inclusive and sustainable development across our continent. The outcomes of this meeting would not only inform global deliberations and the HLPF, but also feed into the work that we continue to bring in our key regional bodies, particularly with the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development Conference and African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development conferences, thereby reinforcing coherence across platforms and processes. This year's Africa Day is particularly intimate. It is dedicated to a very important day, which builds upon the outcomes of the ARFSD held in Kampala earlier this year. So your participation today in our discussions will be key in bringing together high-level participants as well as technical experts and partners to explore how inclusive growth and partnership can unlock decent jobs and robust social protection systems. We're therefore honored to co-host this support platform with the Office of Special Advisor in Africa, my dear sister USCG Christina Duarte, the ECA, and the African Development Bank. This is an opportunity not only to showcase the continuous progress innovation, but also to collectively articulate forward-looking policy recommendations that can help accelerate the implementation of the SDGs and Agenda 2063. We also look forward to officially launching the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2025, which is a key instrument to guide our collective efforts and inspire action. As you begin today's proceedings, we are privileged to be joined by an exceptional lineup of leaders and ministers whose keynote interventions will help set the tone of our deliberations today. We therefore look forward to every each exchange to hear your various perspectives and hopefully to a robust set of conclusions and recommendations that will inspire renewed commitment, a collaboration for the Africa B1. Still very well. Thank you once again for being here. And with that, I have the distinct honor to now invite Her Excellency Ambassador Salma Malika Haddadi, the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, to deliver her remarks and set the stage. Your Kalatiya.
Thank you very much, Captains all. Right Honorable Ms. Robina Banja, Prime Minister of the Republic of Uganda and Chair of the 11th session of the Africa Union of Champs Development. Congratulations, Senator Public Secretary United Nations. Excellency Ambassador Robert Tiaye, President of the 2025 session of the ECOSOC session. Honorable Minister, Mr. Flavor Lekik and the brother Secretary Security Yeneka, my sister, Excellency Christina Duarte, Unity Advisor on Africa, representatives of the United Nations and development partners,
Iskin Shini, Candle Africa,
ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I have the distinct honor delivering this statement at this critical juncture as we gather on this Africa Day at HLPF. Today, as we launch the 2025 Africa Sustainable Development Report, they bear witness not simply to a document, but to a shared compact, a reflection of the progress, lessons, and aspirations that will bind our continent, our member states, and our global counterpart.
isn't it K2K?
This Africa Day is more than
The ceremonial moment.
it is a strategic opportunity to reflect, recalibrate, and recommit. Today, we convene not just to discuss, but to cohere and to iterate our development trajectory, assess the evidence for us, and chart more determined integrity crisis for. Our theme this year, advancing the quantitative agenda of sustainable development and Agenda 2060 to include goals and partnership, social protection, and disinvestment, compels us to examine the interconnected pillars of Pillar. These are not parallel issues; they are literally reinforcing connected.
Beyond the next
It demands the upfront clarity, ebook, broad bay, and deeply rooted, each in the urban and rural able, but it's clear, embracing the young and the old, empowering women and men, and advancing the lives of persons with disability. Across our continent, we are seeing promising innovation in financial inclusion, mobile connectivity, and community-led development that are expanding opportunities for those historically excluded from formal systems. Social protection has evolved from a policy option to a development imperative. We have learned that when citizens have basic security, health coverage, income support during crisis, protection in old age, they become more productive, more innovative, and more willing to invest in their futures. African innovation in social protection from mobile-based youth insurance schemes offer models that merit global attention. This work remains central to human dignity and societal focus. It is not sufficient to create jobs. We must create employment that provides fair wages, safe conditions, and pathways for athletes. This is particularly crucial as our continent prepares to welcome 850 million youth into the workforce by 2050. To harness this potential, we must invest massively in human capital. We cannot achieve the transformation envisioned in Agenda 2060 without massive investment in that investment in human capital. This means not only universal access to quality-based education, but also technical and vocational training aligned with the 21st century economy. It means leveraging technology to reach remote populations and creating pathways from education to employment. Beyond institutions, effective public service delivery and accountable leadership create the enablers environment for inclusive growth. We have seen across our continent that where governance improves, development accelerates. Where transparency increases, public trust grows. where accountability mechanisms function, resources reach intendability. Central to our discussion today must be the voices of those often marginalized in development business. You may continue over has a wonderful prostitution act of azonification and a significant portion of agriculture must be at the heart and at the center, not the periphery of our development strategies. Youth representing our democratic delivery provide not just inclusion and leadership opportunities in shaping their futures. Vulnerable communities, including persons with disabilities, the elderly, and the rural population, must have a specifically at needs at his apple. As we engage in today's discussion and conversation, allow me to propose 4 imperatives that should guide our collective action. First, we must move from diagnosis to delineation. Let this not be another moment of description, but a moment of demonstration, showcasing what works, where, and why. Second, we must ensure coherence and convergence. National Development Plan, the aspirations of Agenda 2060 and the Sustainable Development Goal must reinforce one another, not compete for attention or further. Third, we must redefine partnerships for a new era. True partnerships should not be transactional. They should be anchored in mutual respect, co-creation, and shared responsibility, where knowledge, not just capital, is equally exchanged. Fourth and last, we must demand commitments that count. Clear, measurable, time-bound actions, with mechanisms for follow-up and close connections. Excellencies, as I conclude, let me share a simple truth. We may come from different regions, but we share one planet, one world, and one humanity. The African world, as articulated in Agenda 2060, and the world we live as envisioned in the Agenda 2030 are inextricably linked. Our two challenges, left and at yes, become global crises, just as our solution, if nurtured and scaled, become global assets. Let this meeting serve not only as a moment of reflection, but as a decisive step of coverage, cooperation, as well as. Thank you so much.
Very good.
We thank the Deputy Chairperson of the AU Petition for her reflections, and particularly for underlining a number of key elements, particularly the point on strong institutions, accountability mechanisms, and strengthening governance structures. But more importantly, ensuring that vulnerable communities, those that are least representing women and youth, are taken on board. And we've also taken note of your core action points, which it's actually called T, has taken on board. Now with that, I have the distinct pleasure to now invite Her Excellency Ms. Amina Muma, UN Deputy Secretary General, to deliver her remarks and sentence. Yeah. Thank you very much, Her Excellency Rona Lamanja, our Prime Minister of Uganda, Her Excellency the Deputy Chair of the African Commission in Leicester, South Carolina, His Excellency Lester Bob Reid, Former President of ECOSOC, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, friends, and colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, it really is an honor to join you here today at Africa House to launch the AS of DR 2055. I'd also like to thank Ambassador Fatima Mohammed, our Special Advisor Christina Duarte, and our Executive Secretary DCA Clara Gatete, for their leadership and helping to frame this discussion. As we celebrate Africa Day within this high-level political forum, we gather not only to take stock, but also to bear witness to something extraordinary,
a continent that refuses to be defined by its starting point, but instead chooses to measure itself by how far it has traveled. And I like to quote those 4 priorities how Deputy Chair at the AUC have put in front of us: diagnosis to delivery, our coherence and convergence around the different commitments that we make to planets, partnerships that are genuine, and commitments that count. But let's make no mistake, Africa has begun a sustainable development journey on the back foot. We held colonial legacies that took wealth and left behind fractured societies and weak institutions, climate catastrophes that wash away decades of progress in a single season, conflicts that force entire populations to abandon everything that they had built. And these are daily realities that test the resolve of every African nation. Yet here we stand with 10 countries presenting their honorary national reviews. This year, these are testaments to resilience. Angola achieving its strongest economic growth in a decade while building over 12,000 new schools. Ethiopia sustaining remarkable growth while powering its entire metrical grid from idiotic sources. The Gambia driving robust development across agriculture, tourism, and services. These efforts are part of a broader continental push to realize the vision of Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda. In the VNRs, we see that vision coming to life. More than 100 other VNRs have been prepared in the last decade since the SDGs were adopted, and they all tell a promising story of progress across the continent. But let's be clear on the full scale of the challenges that are facing us. When a country like Sudan faces conflict, sees a vast majority of its factories destroyed and unemployment crushed levels, when we are reminded that progress is neither linear or guaranteed, when young people across our continent still struggle to find decent work, and we know that our most precious resource, our youth, still faces barriers that deny them their rightful place in building tomorrow's Africa. When Africa gets the fundamentals right, like quality education for every child, the path to higher ground becomes clearer. Digital transformation, viable resilience, economic justice, these are no longer distant summits, but peaks within reach, and Africa has always been a continent of kindness. Consider the women breaking barriers across our continent. In parliaments from Rwanda to Eswatini to Ghana, women are claiming seats of power was denied it. Across the Soso, widows now possess rights over family property that the previous generations could never imagine. Each a seismic shift in how African societies recognize power and the potential of half their population. Our youth, too, are not passive recipients of change. They are its architects. From Nigeria's digital revolution to technology-driven governance, Seychelles to Morocco's role in advancing AI research, young Africans are coding and designing the future every step of the way. That said, we should not romanticize the road ahead. At this moment and at this rate, the SDGs are beyond reach and at it. We have 5 years to the 2030 Agenda, 5 years to transform systems that took decades to build, 5 years to close gaps, and the widest gap remains finance. Finance is the engine of progress. Without it, schools don't get built, clinics stay empty, and peace remains out of reach. The global financial system we know is not working correctly. Borrowing costs are too high, debt burdens are too heavy, and the money that could change lives is tied like systems that are too slow, too narrow, and too risk-averse. The severe commitment is a step forward, a promise to get resources flowing faster, fairer, and at the scale that we need. The next 5 years will test not only our ambition, but our ability to deliver on its basic promises of dignity and justice, especially in the areas where progress remains most elusive. Many women still face gender-based violence that steals their safety, their dignity, and their dreams. And we must dismantle the structural barriers that persist, shadows, following women from childhood through their adult lives. Our young people deserve more than they get. We must invest urgently in skills development, particularly in the digital and green sectors where Africa can lead in the world. The bigger picture also betrays the all too persistent and present imbalance. Too often, African countries are absent when tables where global decisions are made, yet they are the first to feel the impact. Pact for the Future is working to change that. It calls for more inclusive, represented great governance that reflects today's realities. Not a snapshot, a snapshot of yesterday. It recognizes that sustainable development cannot be built on a foundation of exclusion. And by adopting the pact, countries committed to ensuring Africa is where it belongs at the table, shaping the decisions that shape our world. And we are taking the necessary steps to ensure the countries have the support and the capacity needed to do just that. The Secretary General's UN 80 initiative also builds on the existing reforms and plots and wishes are forward to ensure that those he serves have the optimal level and type of capacity of the countries. Excellencies, Africa's journey towards 2030, 2063 and beyond is not a lit sprint, it is a relay race where each nation, each community and each individual carries the baton forward. The African Sustainable Development for 2025 that we are launching today represents both progress and the challenges for a continent still writing its greatest chapters. It's a declaration that future generations will inherit not the limitations we fix, but the possibilities we create. Above all, must lead to a refusal to accept that is determines destiny. I would like to thank the African Union, Economic Commission, and the African Development Bank, UNDP, for preparing this crucial piece of work. Let it be an input to our roadmap ahead. Let us build on the foundation of the commitments that it represents. The relay baton is in our hands, the finish line is in sight, and from what I've seen, African nations, their genuine heartness, resilient, determined, and insightful, are ready. We thank the Deputy Secretary General for her reflections and more importantly, giving us the tour d'horizon, highlighting the challenges but also recognizing progress made in specific country contexts despite these challenges. I think more important, we heard some complete recommendations, how we can leverage the Pact of the Future, the opportunities of the UN at 80 initiative with the Secretary General, but more importantly, the importance of continuity. As long as we continue and move forward in the right direction, collectively with strong partnerships, we'll be at that. Now I have the distinct pleasure to welcome the Prime Minister of the Republic of Uganda and the chair of the 11th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development to present her keynote speech. Your Excellency, Robina Nabanja, Prime Minister of the Republic of Uganda, you are top.
Thank you so much. Your Excellencies and distinguished stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you warm greetings from His Excellency General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda, and the people of Uganda. I have the honor on behalf of my government and in my capacity as the chair of the Bureau for the 11th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, and with this year's Africa Day Ministerial Meeting at the 25th High Depot, Port-Scofa. Let me begin by commending all our co-organizers, the African Union Commission, the United Nations Office, and the Special Advisors on Africa, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, United Nations Development Program, and the African Development Bank for arranging this year's annual Ministerial Meeting. The crucial platform for African later states share their challenges and opportunities in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Agenda 2063. This year's theme, advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063 through it pushes both and partnerships, social protection, and decent jobs is timely and urgent. It directly speaks the core challenges and opportunities shaping Africa's global landscape in today in its effort to achieve sustainable development. This Africa Day convened to be views on the outcomes on the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, which Uganda hosted in Kampala from 9th to 11th April this year, under the theme driving job creation and economic growth through sustainable, inclusive, science and evidence-based solutions for the 2030 Agenda 2063. The Africa Regional Forum Sustainable Portrait concluded with the adoption of the Kampala Declaration with concrete actions accelerate sustainable development goals implementation across our continent. Africa Day and the high-level political forum 2025 is an opportunity to reflect, engage, and commit to the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2060. While Africa has made notable progress, such as a 17% increase in the intra-Africa trade since 2018, and increased the biennial visitations from trade countries in 2018, 43 in 2025, significant limitation gaps in May. For instance, in 2023, only 19 of vulnerable African accessed social protection benefits, compared to a global average of 52%. Meanwhile, Africa spends just 3.7% of the GDP of social protection, excluding health, far below the global average of 3.9 in 2016. These figures highlight the urgency, mobilizing the resources, scaling up partnerships, and rethinking delivery mechanisms. Africa's year pressure offers a reason of hope and innovation. But to unlock this potential, we must address structural barriers and financing costs, especially as we head towards the COP23, the COP30 in Berlin, Brazil, and the Second World Social Summit for Social Movement in Doha, Qatar, later this year. Therefore, our meeting today must focus on solutions, not just challenges. We must leverage SDG 70 to forge partnerships at all levels that strengthen both, that is SDG 3, and advance gender equality, that is SDG number 5, stimulate decent work, and pushing both, that's SDG number 8, and protect our marine ecosystem, that is SDG number 14. Excellencies, the Africa we want is within the reach, but only if we act with unity, urgency, and ambition. Uganda remains committed to work closely with you all and advance the implementation with Agenda 2030 and 2063 Agenda of Africa. In conclusion, we therefore order all stakeholders to enable us accelerate the implementation
on the two agendas ASAP.
And we thank the Prime Minister of Uganda for her keynote address. And now I have the distinct pleasure to welcome Honorable Gov.
Ray, President of ECOSOC for 2025, to present his remarks. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Excellencies, distinguished ministers, Prime Minister, Deputy SG, colleagues, and friends. I'm rather self-conscious because I'm the only non-African in this group. I'm also the only man. So I think we're off to a good start, I would say, when we look and see how the room has been transformed and the messaging has been taken up. Let me also just say a word to thank Ambassador Mohammed for her wonderful leadership as representative of the AU. She sent us all a note saying that she's leaving, for which I'm very sorry personally, because she's been a great colleague during our joint time here. And I want to thank her very much for her leadership and bringing us all together. It's a great privilege. Thank you. It's a great privilege to be here. I want to thank the Commission, the UN Office of the Special Advisor, and all those who've been involved in organizing, but I think this is an important and very timely gathering. This is more than just a symbolic occasion. It is a platform to allow African voices to be amplified, but not only be amplified, but to be heard and to be heeded, and to ensure that Africa remains central to all of our global efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Let me put it this way. In my view, we only succeed, the world only succeeds, if we succeed in Africa. Africa's success is core to the success of the rest of the world. I don't just say that because I happen to be here. I say it because I actually think it's true. Because Africa is such a center of growth and such a center of change and such a center of dynamism that we have to see it as helping us to achieve the goals rather than as holding us back. Africa can lead, and the rest of us need to pay attention to the changes and the transformation that's taking place in Africa today. We have to recognize, as my friend Amina has said, the extraordinary resilience and the leadership of African countries in advancing the SDGs, even amid climate change, which impacts Africa as it impacts us all, economic disruption, and yes, conflict which is definitely holding all the world back. The data, of course, is sobering. We've heard the numbers all of the last 2 weeks that we didn't know them before. Only 35% of the SDG targets are on track globally, although I have to say that number is trending up, not trending down. And in Africa, we have a $200 billion annual financing gap, which I want to speak to directly. I think that the conference in Sevilla, which, by the way, should not be translated as the Sevilla Compromise. It must be translated as the Sevilla Commitment. It is the commitment that we make that matters, because it includes a pledge to double support for domestic resource mobilization by 2030 and a renewed focus on debt transparency. I'll come back to this in a moment, because these are important steps, even though I know full well, and I can tell you as the president of ECOSOC, I'm fully aware, that African countries had hoped for and pushed for more decisive action on debt restructuring. Another thing that emerged in the Seville discussions was that the loss due to illicit financial flows, which requires not only people flowing out, but it requires people taking the money in. That equals more than $500 billion annually due to financial flows and to other inefficiencies. As a result, we know this figure too, which is the most troubling one, which is more than 60% of African countries spend more on debt servicing than they do on healthcare. This has to change. But in the Seville document, there's a way to change it that does not just involve one side or the other, one group or another. It involves a collective effort of raising more money internally, starting to deal with the corruption of the illicit financial flows issue in a very direct fashion, and at the same time, increasing investment and, yes, increasing transfers. If all those things happen together, we can, in fact, make real progress in increasing the capacity of the state and also in reducing the gap in finances which currently exists. And that has to be our target. It's been very clear to me in my role now as president for the past year that Africa is not at all standing still. It's clear that there's innovation, there's resilience, and there's ambition. On my recent trip to Africa, I met with people who were involved in AI. I met with centers of excellence dealing with training. I met with people who were looking for entrepreneurial answers. I spoke to new business people, men and women who are eager to create wealth and create jobs and create opportunities in their countries and are looking for ways to reach out to others. Even in the last 5 years, trade within Africa has increased by nearly 20%. There's stuff that's really going on in a very positive, even in difficult circumstances. I saw this firsthand when I was at the 11th Africa Regional Forum in Kampala and heard for myself what exactly was taking place. The value addition in agriculture and mining, the investment in youth and women, innovative financing, green and blue bonds, diaspora bonds, and climate finance that's tailored to the needs of Africa. I have to also say that I was and am especially moved by the determination of Africa's youth. It truly is, and I can say this as a Canadian because I meet with African youth in Canada who are there for education or they're visiting. It's extraordinary, the level of entrepreneurship, the ambition, the drive of the young men and women of Africa that I've been meeting with is quite extraordinary. They're not asking anybody for permission to lead. They are claiming their right to shape a dignified, a just, and a sustainable future. So I want to suggest that we use the outcomes of this day, of Africa Day, to inform all of our efforts to achieve the 2030 agenda. But also, if I may say so, start to think a little bit of what more we need to do after 2030. The world doesn't stop at 2030. We don't fall off a cliff in 2030. And we have to begin the discussion in the next couple of years as to how we see a future that goes well beyond 2030 to help us achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm well aware of the fact that in Africa, it's Agenda 2063, so it's a much more ambitious and long-term future. I can assure you that as president, I have tried to be committed to supporting Africa's leadership on priorities, meeting with the African ambassadors, meeting with heads of government when they come to New York, engaging with all of you. But I'd like to close with a message that I saw on the wall of a school that I visited in Nairobi at the same time as I was visiting Kampala, the same trip. There was a little sign on the wall which to me made a lot of sense. It said this: the bridge between hope and achievement is determination. I thought that was a wonderful message for the kids to be reading every day, because we all know that without persistence and without determination, we cannot succeed. But if we have that determination, then we can walk on that bridge between hope and achievement. I've seen that determination in the work that I've been doing this past year right across Africa. And let me suggest that we must match it. We must match it with action, with continuing solidarity, and I particularly appreciated the words of Ambassador Haddadi, who made it clear that there are elements that we have to look at that go beyond the transaction. We're not talking here about simply doing business with each other. We're not talking simply about investing money and hoping to get a quick return. We're talking about building a common future, about the humanity that we share, about our lives that we share, and about our relationships that we must be determined to deepen and make even more meaningful. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Burberry, for your reflections, and especially reminding us about the Sevilla commitments, taking them forward despite the gaps, and also for the very kind words expressed.
Excellencies, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our high-level hunt. I'd kindly like to invite you to give another round of applause to I will not attempt to summarize. However, as just the conclusion, I just want to take the opportunity to once again extend my sincere gratitude to the Office of the Special Advisor Africa, particularly USG Duarte and her team for the excellent cooperation of the UNECA, Executive Secretary Ambassador the UNDP, and of course the African Development Bank for their our partnership. And as was said, this is the last time that I will be hosting this meeting in this current capacity. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for their excellent cooperation over the years. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now invite the high-level panels. Please come down for the floor and I'll ask my team. Please guide. Yeah. Hop in.
Ich glaube es sei. Sie depositiert es.
One sec.
Finance of the Gambia, Her Excellency the representative or the Special Assistant to the President from Nigeria, representatives from Ghana and from Angola, from Seychelles, and we, as well as the State Minister from Ethiopia. Thank you very much to you all for joining us. And we will, if we have a small amount of time, take some additional comments from the floor. Because some of our speakers have some other events, I would like to immediately proceed to invite Dr. Adelaide Madlanyane, the Minister of Finance and Development Planning of Lesotho. First of all, Minister, thank you so much for being with us. And I think the Deputy Secretary General and other speakers already outlined some of the leadership being undertaken by the country in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals in Agenda 2063. And we would love to hear a little bit more from you in terms of the lessons that Lesotho has learned in terms of the voluntary national reviews and some examples of what has worked in terms of SDG implementation, and as well how this is out for Agenda 2063, how we can use this to scale our passion in African states.
Thank you very much, moderator. Once again, let me thank you for inviting me to this distinguished panel. Moderator, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, UCS Clean, Abasi 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063 through inclusive growth and partnerships, social protection and decent jobs, is both timely and appropriate as we enter into the remaining 5 years of the implementation of Agenda 2030 and into the second 10-year implementation of 2063. Although Lesotho made every effort to make progress to achieve the SDGs, as outlined in our first biennial report of 2019, we must mention that the adverse effects of COVID-19 recorded from the year 2020 and impacts of climate change captured progress on the gains that we had made. The situation is now being exacerbated by declining ODA and foreign direct investment in the country, into the country, and together with the economic climate
and policy shifts that are occurring at this time. I do want to acknowledge that all of this has made the achievement of the 2030 agenda to be at a distant horizon for us. But notwithstanding these challenges, the Sitro remains resolute and steadfast on the implementation of the 2030 agenda as well as the 2060 agenda. Allow me, therefore, moderator, to reflect on the Citro's journey on the implementation of the 2030 agenda as well as the 2063 agenda. Firstly, in an effort to advance the implementation of the two agendas, the Citro aligned both frameworks into her national strategic development plans as well as national policies, along with the plans of other bodies that the Citro associates itself with, including the SADC, the Southern Arctic and Customs Union, the AU, and others. So the country also embarked on a nationwide awareness campaigns to promote the understanding and acknowledgement and ownership of the SDGs amongst key stakeholders in the country. We localized them, and these efforts were also aimed at highlighting the importance of the 2030 agenda and Agenda 2063 in achieving international development goals. We cannot separate people from the SDG agenda as well as Agenda 2063, particularly in addressing persistent structural vulnerabilities, extreme poverty, enhancement of resilience, and building capacity. The government also took ownership of the implementation exercise by allocating resources as far as possible and to the extent that we could afford to ensure the successful implementation of these goals. In addition, efforts made to diversify financing sources, including leveraging innovative financial instruments, leveraging on the funds from the private sector, and making private sector an integral part of retaining domestic resources, attracting FDI, and exploring ways to access international development funds, as well as climate finance to support the implementation of these agendas. In collaboration with the UN, the Institute Office, we developed the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework that runs from 2024 to 2038, that we gave its Institute name, loosely translated, and the speech of Nsoka is known to be a man who could run very, very fast. It is a framework that calls for accelerated pace in implementation, in decision-making, in delivery, and coordination of roadmap priorities, while leveraging all available resources, domestic and international, private and public, by the government of the Secretary and development partners to ensure that we do not leave anyone behind. We have made strides on the introduction of innovative financing instruments such as green bonds and public-private partnerships, which present opportunities to accelerate progress, to leverage the little and meager resources that we have so that we rush to achieving these goals. However, I must hasten to say that financing gaps persist and are stubborn. Therefore, leveraging partnerships with the private sector is crucial for addressing these gaps. Hence, we are intensively working on partnerships, SDGs survey teach. We continue to recognize the potential of the young population of Lesotho as a driving force for future growth. Efforts to enhance young participation in governance, entrepreneurship, and decision-making processes are steps in the right direction that Lesotho is taking. However, challenges such as high unemployment, especially amongst the youth, limited access to capital, and the skills mismatches must be addressed. And we are addressing them to truly the potential of the youth and future generation. Otherwise, we recognize and realize that we will lose on the democratic dividends that we otherwise leverage on. We are creating an enabling environment for young people to thrive, particularly by improving education, fostering innovation, and expanding employment opportunities that are critical to securing a prosperous future. So in this connection, we have established innovation hubs, incubation centers, basically trying to push the youth into employment creators and not employment seekers. And at the heart of our transformation agenda is digital transformation. This is a key enabler for resilience and inclusive development. We're investing in affordable and accessible digital infrastructure, advancing digital literacy, and scaling up innovation ecosystems that prioritize youth, women, and rural communities. Through e-governance and digital public service initiatives, we seek to enhance efficiency, transparency, and citizen participation. Mr. Moderator, I wish to conclude by asserting that the onus is on us as Africans to streamline the two agendas in our national and embed them within our national and urban plans, ensuring domestic resource mobilization funds our own development agenda and conduct constant regional reviews. We need to continue to share, to replicate where others have done well, and accelerate the work that we are doing together as Africans. And more importantly, to take matters into our hands to see that we are at the forefront of funding and financing development. I wish to thank you for listening. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those remarks. And we do understand that you have to leave us to present the Orange International Review. And we wish you well for that exercise. And thank you for having taken a moment to share with us particularly the ownership that Lesotho is taking. And I think that is the strength of how we can address the acceleration that is needed. I recall that in the rush to start, I didn't introduce myself. For those who don't know me, I am Jean-Paul Ladan. I'm the Director for Policy Monitoring and Advocacy in the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa. And we're very pleased to be able to welcome you all today. I'd now like to turn to Mr. Kleva Gatete. Thank you very much, Minister. I'd now like to turn to Mr. Kleva Gatete, who is Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And ES, we know that you serve the role, of course, as the head of the organization of the Economic Commission of Africa, but you are also supporting the work of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development in terms of the Secretariat. And we have heard very consistently during the high-level People Forum on some of those messages that have been emerging, particularly about Africa reclaiming access to its resources and being able to develop value addition to benefit people on the continent in terms of decent jobs and allowing African resources to work for African citizens. So can you expand a little bit on some of those key messages as takeaways, and what else do we need to do to unlock the potential in Africa?
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. The Ambassador Seri Mahadadi, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, honorees are present and organized from Lesotho, Gambia, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, and Uganda. I see my sister here. My dear friend Christina Duachi, distinguished delegates, ambassadors, colleagues, it is an honor for me to welcome you to this year's Africa Day at a high-level political forum, a vital platform to reflect on Africa's progress and the critical choices we must make to stay on course toward sustainable development as a nation. I'm especially delighted that today marks the official launch of the 2025 Africa Sustainable Development Report, which is our Ontain's flagship evidence-based assessment of the 2030 Agenda and the African Union's Agenda 2063. But before we begin, I extend my sincere thanks to the African Union Observer Missions, especially my sister Fatima Mohammed, for hosting us today and also acknowledge our long-standing partnership with the Commission. Personally, it will be difficult to come here without seeing Fatima, and I want to thank you very much for your service to Africa. Thank you. Since 2018, Africa Day at the high-level political forum has become the flagship African event on the ethos of courage. It is delivered in collaboration with the United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, the UNDP, and of course the Economic Commission for Africa. This year, we are also pleased to broaden our partnership by welcoming the African Women Park as the natural co-organizer for this event. Africa Day at the HLPF is your path. On behalf of all the co-organizers, I extend our greatest appreciation to you for making this a relevant and impactful platform in our joint efforts to make the Africa we want a reality. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, so how far have we come and how much further must we go to deliver on our shared promise of sustainable development for Africa? The 2025 report presents a mixed picture. Yes, Africa has made significant gains in areas such as education, healthcare, and digital innovation. But we cannot truly celebrate progress when we remain off track on more than half of the SDGs. So with only 5 years to go, we have no other choice but now act with urgency and greater resolve. In this regard, allow me to outline 5 priority recommendations that can accelerate Africa's progress towards sustainable development. First, we must address the continent's assistance development climate change. Africa today faces an annual SDG financing shortfall of up to $1.3 trillion, which is the greatest burden falling in the least developed countries. To close this gap, we must scale up the use of innovative financing instruments, including green finance, green and blue bonds, and diaspora loans. Equally, we must harness the economic power of the informal sector, which employs over 83% of the workforce. At the same time, reforming and digitizing national tax systems, closing loopholes, and curbing illicit financial costs, as mentioned by Bob Gray, currently estimated at $8 billion annually, are indispensable. Furthermore, the reform of the global financial market has also remained a central demand, not just for Africa, but for all developed ingredients seeking fair access to finances. Second, Africa must accelerate economic diversification and regional integrations. While the continent is projected to host 12 of the world's 20 fastest growing economies in 2025, growth must be made more inclusive, sustainable, and transformative. This means investing in the value addition to our natural resources, scaling up green industrialization, and leveraging the full potential of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to deepen intra-Africa trade and a very competitive regional value chain. Special economic zones such as those in Benin demonstrate the potential for productive investment and export-led development. This year stands ready to support the member states to advance industrial policy, regional infrastructure, and energy transitions aligned with their development phases. That we must strengthen national development planning and accountability systems. This year, 9 African countries undertook voluntary national reviews, including 2 second-time and 7 third-time presenters. VNRs are instruments of national alignment, peer learning, and inclusive governance. Encouragingly, more countries are integrating Agenda 2063 into their BNR processing. ensuring coherence between security and global goals. However, progress demands stronger investment in data systems, local capacity, and cross-sector coordination. ECA will continue to support countries through technical advisory services, the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, and the capacity building initiative for more effective planning and monitoring. Fourth, inclusive development must be placed at the heart of previous matters. No progress will be sustainable unless empowers those farthest behind, especially youth, women, informal workers, and marginalized communities. With the World Social Summit approach, Africa must take the lead in advancing a global agenda on social protection, decent work, and inclusive growth. To seize its demographic dividend, the continent must invest in education, as mentioned before, healthcare, and digital skills, which will keep its people to lead Africa's next wave of innovation and enterprise. Fifth and last, we must elevate Africa's voice in the global policy processes. How can the world truly shape a sustainable future without Africa at the tech? In this respect, the 2025 Africa Sustainable Development Report is not just a scorecard, it is an advocacy tool. It must inform national strategies and strengthen Africa's position in global dialogues, from the SDGs Summit forward and the Pact for the Future to COP 2030 and beyond. This year will continue to support member states, particularly their development priorities, advance regional consensus, and shape global outcomes that reflect African realities. Excellencies, as I conclude, let us remember that the clock is ticking. In 5 short years, we must reverse course, reignite progress on SDGs, and bring Africa's vision as outlined in Agenda 2063 to life. Indeed, Africa is a continent of possibilities. As such, Africa Day as HLPF must serve as a rallying point for collective resolve and renewed momentum to turn in the heart. We already have the tools and the current to deliver. What we now need is unity of purpose, audacious leadership, and partnerships that are transformative. And ECA, working hand in hand with other allies, stands firmly by your side to ensure that past lessons are translated into concrete action that will lead to lasting transformation across our continent. I thank you very much for your kind.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary Gatete, and thank you for highlighting some of those key action areas that emerged from the Sustainable Development Report, and as well how this helps to transform Africa, which is the very principles which drive both Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals, and how we measure that progress. And I think in particular we noted the 5 areas of focus which we need to emphasize. I would now like to go through some ministers to share their experiences from countries. Yes, I know you might have to leave because you have another event as well. And I would be starting with His Excellency Mr. Sidi Keita, the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs from Gambia. And we know that Gambia has presented the 3 rounds of the as one of the leading countries in terms of sharing these best practices. And we would like to hear from you in terms of what you felt were the most useful aspects in terms of ensuring action-orientated approaches through your international reviews that contribute towards tangible actions and progress in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals. Minister, over to you. Because we are running late from the first session, I would ask all speakers, if possible, to remain within 4 minutes, if possible. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Moderator, Excellencies, distinguished guests, follow-up protocols, Julie, and respected yours. As you have mentioned, this year's Vienna presentation of the Gambia represents the 3rd Vienna presentation of the country. And it was very insightful, and we have received very good feedback. It shows the gains we have made on the 3 SDG goals: health, marine environment, partnerships. We have made tremendous gains in these 3 areas, despite the challenging times that we have been. As we know, we have still not come out of the worst of the impact of the COVID-19. And as if that was not enough, as soon as that was over, we were confronted to supply chain disruption that unleashed through the Russia-Ukraine war, and of course the associated spiraling effect of inflation. But notwithstanding, we believe that healthcare is almost under the right of all citizens, and that's why we have invested massively in the infrastructure and the soft elements of the healthcare delivery. As a result, our child mortality rate has declined by 50% from our last PNR review of 2022 to date, which is quite a commendable achievement. It's more pronounced, particularly within the tight environment everywhere. On the marine environment, we had challenges because our stock depleted, but by a marginal percentage of about 3%. Notwithstanding, this was on the backdrop of overfishing, which came about through commercial fishing, and of course the pressures of the rising population to coastline. So the government has come up with policies and measures to ensure that commercial fishing license and the regulation of the fisheries are properly executed so that the fish stock will prevail. Our partnerships, we leverage on the entire multilateral bilateral network to focus on our economic development. And you're pleased that this partnership dovetails very well into our domestic resource mobilization strategy, which was tremendously successful. We're pleased to have seen a GDP growth rate of more than 5.5% over a period. And Gambia has been emerging as one of the 10 fastest growing economies in Africa over a review period. We are not complacent, and we are deepening reforms, and these reforms are sponsored at the highest level of the government. His Excellency the President Adama Barrow is spearheading the reforms because the cabinet were rarely around, and the reforms have helped to increase the domestic resources. Just a case in point, in 2022, our total domestic tax collection was about 11.6 billion, but for the first half of 2035, we have collected 32 billion. That means we've collected almost in 6 months what we collected 2 years ago. These are gains, and these gains have gone on to support improving the life value of our Gambians, starting with increase of the civil service wages, which increased by 60% from 2022 to date, and increase in the infrastructure space of road network. The road network has increased by more than 40% for the review period, and access to energy has equally been increased. Today, Gambia has an energy coverage of about 76%, and we are on course to attain universal access to energy by the end of 2026. These are our highlights of our VNR, and would we believe we could share with the rest of our givers. We thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Minister. And I think that the progress is made is remarkable. And I think in particular what I would like to highlight is that you have emphasized, of course, the economic gains, but also how investing in resilience, such as healthcare, is critical. And one doesn't go without the indivisible. And then directly linking this as well to how that helps the economy to grow, and how that allows countries to that get much better results on domestic resource mobilization. And I would say that from your presentation, we take away that you reduce your infant mortality rate and you raise more resources. And that is the path of sustainable development, where you are dealing with the social aspects of resilience while simultaneously raising more resources for investment in those sectors. I would now like to go to the representative of Nigeria. Yes, thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you for bearing with us to have the remarks of the Minister. We'll follow Nigeria with, I will go to the State Minister from Ethiopia after that. And so, Your Excellency Princess Adejoke Orelope Adefolire, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on the Sustainable Development Goals, we are honored to hear from you in terms of first of all, the leadership that we have already heard about in some of the remarks from the high-level speakers, but in terms of putting, for example, the SDGs in the Office of the President, putting that priority, how is Nigeria advancing this integration of the SDGs and Agenda 2063 into national development planning, and what lessons or innovations can be shared to inspire regional collaboration and global partnerships for accelerated implementation?
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, the honorable the colleagues, policymakers, and distinguished delegates, and honored to be here today to share Nigeria's experience in advancing sustainable development goals and the American Union Agenda 2063. And the most populous country in Africa, Nigeria recognizes the political importance of those reports and by driving the inclusiveness, sustainable modes, and development. Nigeria has demonstrated unwavering commitment to the Sustainable Development Goal and Agenda 2030 through motivated approach and integrate national policy. We base our implementation on frameworks, institutional framework, and policies, then local governance, both the national and sub-national levels, and community engagement. Based at the voluntary national, the EU and local reviews of sub-national government, and we align those with the global frameworks, which is referred to as the National Development Plan. Particularly, develop a working tools national government known as the Economic Recovery and Food Plan of DHP that was used by the national government and some national government in 2021 and 2024, which prioritizes economic growth, inclusive and broad-based and sustainable development. And that was based on our national development priorities. We also label outcomes as a government and exactly collaboration with both international organizations, like I said, also the donor agencies, the non-governmental organizations, civil society, and also we extend our participation working with young people that we refer to as coach, NYC coach champion. That is this fresh graduate that comes out of university that government give him to posted to different part of the communities in Nigeria to have internship for 1 year. And so we engage them and we make them as our coach champion to get to the different riverine communities, rural areas, to look at their needs and extend our advocacy and sensitization on implementation of the SDG and how the community can contribute their quotas and be represented in our conversations. So those people, after their 1 year, they hand over to the next set of caution, and you have multi-layer champions that we have identified, the philanthropists, we have the women organization, we have the children organization too, that we're engaging differently in different layers of collaboration, and it's so that we can catch everybody, you can extend our advocacy and sensitization to all organizations. We also have the presidential council of SDGs, where the president himself chair, as well as having the National Assembly's 2 standing committee at the parliament to work with us, constitutional
for legislation if there's need be, so that they know what we are doing, and if there's need for legislation on critical issues, they would be part of the discussion, and since they know what we are doing, I will bring them regularly to be able to provide leadership. Also, we work on data-driven decision-making process. We realign our national statistical system with the requirement of SDGs, and we're investing substantially in strengthening it. Also, working with the National Bureau of Statistics and the planning offices at the national level and at sub-national level. With this decision making is informed by getting a credible, timely, segregated data that can be used for planning. We continue to work with the National Bureau of Statistics because it's a recognized body for the national government of Nigeria, and they get data from sub-national government. After we have realigned and then integrated the SDG into the plans of the sub-national government, we have 36 states in Nigeria and FCT, the capital. So we have succeeded in getting 22 of the 36 states. We have domesticated and integrated the SDG into their plans, program, and policy, so that between them and the national government, which we have done initially, we'll be on the same page, working together to achieve the SDG. So after completing the 36 states, that metamorphosed to the grassroots of the local government, the third tier of government in Nigeria. So we are working together as one government, achieving the SDGs. So we're also localizing the...
Because we're a bit short of time, but you could complete in about a minute.
Okay. So that gives us makes us localize the SDG at sub-national level, and it's working well for us, and that we base our third national voluntary review on more stakeholder engagement, where all the stakeholders were engaged, and that formed the basis of our third presentation this morning. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Your Excellency, and particularly for highlighting the link between local governance and the delivery of the planning aspect and the development plan and the implementation of the development plan. And you also emphasize the leadership that needs to happen at the governmental level, the involvement of Parliament, and also the role of data in terms of planning and domestication. I think these are all very important lessons in the consideration of implementation of Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. We have a couple of more speakers, and I'd like to start with the next one, Ethiopia, followed by Ghana, and then Angola, and then Seychelles. And if we have some time, we might take some quick comments from the floor. But I'd like to go to His Excellency Mr. Bereket Testariam, the State Minister of Planning and Development of Ethiopia. And Minister, if you could share with us some of your reflections on the key messages from Ethiopia in terms of implementing the SDGs. And if I may, our Deputy Secretary General today said that in particular, Africa can lead on digital and on planning. And since Ethiopia will be hosting later this year as well the Africa Climate Summit, how can we look at Africa to really harness this opportunity for green growth and harnessing its energy potential? We heard that Ethiopia is already 100% renewable in terms of its grid. How can Africa continue to yield on that aspect based on your experiences in the
Thank you, Mr. K. Your Excellencies, your distinguished delegates and delegates and gentlemen, it is a great honor to join this year's Africa Day at high-level political forum and share Ethiopia's perspective as we continue implementing the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. This Ethiopia's perspectives as we continue implementing the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063 occasion marking the launch of the Africa Sustainable Development Report 2025 offers a timely platform to reflect on the progress, gap, and gain-changing donation to advance inclusive growth, essential social protection in Africa. Ethiopia 2025 PNR reaffirms our unwavering commitment to both global and continental goals. We pursued this review through an inclusive, evidence-based, and action-oriented approach. On driving inclusive growth and decent work, over the past 7 years, Ethiopia has undertaken bold economic reforms anchored in the homegrown economic reform agenda, designed to foster structural transformation, macroeconomic stability, and job-rich growth. This reform aligns with Africa's Union's second 10-year implementation plan and serves as an accelerator for both agendas. Key achievements include electricity access has tripled, now reaching nearly 2/3 of the population, or done by renewable energy investments. All weather road network has doubled, linking market and communities and facilitating inclusive economic participation. Digital connectivity has expanded rapidly, with nationwide 3G coverage enabling e-governance and good entrepreneurship. Urban renewal programs, such as the Corridor Development Strategy, are transforming cities into cleaner, greener, and more livable spaces. However, we acknowledge that youth unemployment, especially among women and facial inequalities, remain critical challenges. Tackling this requires scaled-up investment in human capital, MSMEs, and inclusive urban and rural economies backed by innovative financial. On expanding social protection and building resilience, aligned with the forum's focus, Ethiopia is advancing social protection as a pillar of inclusive development. Our productive safety program now reaches 9.7 million people, making it the largest in Africa. The community-based health insurance scheme covers 63 million people, helping to reduce catastrophic health spending and progress towards universal health coverage. Our school feeding and infrastructure program, notably the education for all generations, ensure nutrition and budget for vulnerable children. Yet we face systematic challenge. Social protection coverage remains constrained by limited physical space, informal labor market dominance, and under-resourced local institutions. This mirrors the continent's further. On accelerating gender equality and health outcomes, Ethiopia has been mainstreamed gender-responsive budgeting and implemented targeted reforms to reduce unpaid care work and expand women's participation in the economy. Maternal mortality has dropped by more than half, and insignificant gains have been recorded in child health and disease control. Still, challenges such as child stunting and gender-based harmful practices persist, demanding sustained and formulated effort. We call for greater investment in care system, digital access for women and girls, and equitable health financing, aligned with the SDGs 3 and 5 and the African Union broader gender strategy. On climate action and blue economy, under the plan Ethiopia is making transformative strides. Through our Green Legacy initiative, over 40 billion trees have been planted, restoring degraded land and empowering local livelihoods. We launched a low emissions development strategy targeting net zero by 2050. Ethiopia became the first country globally to ban the import of non-electric vehicles, signaling the world wishes to clean mobility. Local efforts in lake and watershed restoration now cover nearly 40 million hectares, contributing to SDG 40. However, the climate finance gap is widening. Despite our ambition, global support remains woefully inadequate, undermining both mitigation and adaptation efforts. We equal the facts for the future. Climate justice is development justice. Africa cannot be expected to shoulder the burden of a crisis it do not create. We call for predictable conditional financing aligned with national priorities, a reformed global financial architecture that addresses Africa's vulnerability, innovative instruments such as digital levies and regional climate funds, including de-risking of private finance, partnerships that strengthen African leadership and institutional capacity. Ethiopia's journey and this VNR offer key lessons. Locally driven initiatives such as the Irrigated Wheat Program, the community-based health insurance, and Green Legacy are powerful accelerators when rooted in community ownership. Integrated planning, combining Agenda 2063, the Agenda 2030, and national development priorities foster coherence and accountability. Partnership must evolve, not just in volume but in nature, anchored in mutual respect, knowledge exchange, and transformative impact. Excellencies, Ethiopia remains fully committed to the 2030 and 2063 agendas. But commitment alone is not enough. We need global solidarity, fair trade, accessible financing, and reform of global governance. Only then can we unlock Africa's full potential for our people, for the planet, and the future generations. Let us work together to ensure no island.
Thank you very much, Minister. And there's so much that you have mentioned which I think is of use for other countries. You have also highlighted this link between the focus on mobilizing resources, but also investing in social protection, you mentioned, for example, health insurance, as a means of developing resilience. And I think this is key. And you have emphasized as well climate resilience as a key aspect which needs to be addressed, and of course the availability of financing more broadly. So thank you so much for having shared those experiences. And we will now go to Ghana, to Dr. Ni Moy Thompson, the chairman of the National Development Planning Commission and the senior advisor to the president of Ghana on the SDGs. And we'd like to hear from you, Dr. Thompson, to share with us your reflections on how Ghana is ensuring that long-term development planning is aligned with the Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. And based on your reports, the VNR reports that you have done, what are the institutional or policy innovations that you feel can be highlighted to help countries scale up action?
Sure. Thank you very much. The full presentation was submitted to you as previously agreed, and so I will just highlight a couple of things. One of them is to address the first part of the question, long-term, the relevance of long-term national development plan, which we started in 2015. And as part of the plan, which is 40 years, we actually developed a matrix that aligns the SDGs, previous, of course, you have MDGs, that aligns the SDGs with the objectives of the AU's Agenda 2060. And this has been carried out throughout since through medium-term national development plans. Closely related to that is the relevance or the impact for long-term national, or the necessity for long-term national development plan, which used to give us a sense of the structural impediments to growth and economic transformation. At the beginning of this forum last week, we addressed two gaps. One was financing gap, and the other one was the innovation gap. But I also made the point that there's a third gap that we don't pay adequate attention to, that I think we need to highlight, perhaps even mainstream throughout the implementation of the SDGs and the AU's Agenda 2023, which is the productivity gap, which comes with issues of the efficient utilization of resources. So it's not just the inflow of additional resources, whether domestically or international, but how resourceful you are in utilizing them efficiently. And then there's a whole range of resources. There could be financial resources, there could be human resources, there could be material resources, there could even be time resources. How efficiently we utilize them would ultimately make a critical difference. In fact, ultimately, we can make the case that the development gap is a productivity gap. Now, once we address issues of productivity, we would implicitly have addressed the issue of the development gap. And a good example is what is happening, for instance, in New York City now. There are 8 million people in New York City. They produce 1 trillion, slightly more than 1 trillion. So they have a GCG or GDP of $1 trillion. That's 1/3 of the entire GDP of Africa, which has a population of 1.5 billion people. So you see the huge productivity gap. And this is just for New York City. Yes, there are historical and institutional differences, but the technical principle remains the same, that the more efficient you are with your resources, the better it is. And I'm very happy, as I went through the report to be launched, I'm sorry for preempting, but I was very glad to read the chapter 4, which addresses SDG 8, and the fact that it highlights productivity, says labor force productivity is lower in Africa than across the world. That itself is a reminder of the work that we need to do. It also talks about the high prevalence of informality
over 90%. This is a structural problem which requires long-term, medium to long-term planning. We cannot resolve them in 3 or 4 years, and so we need to take a long-term vision of that. So that summarizes some of the key aspects of our long-term, the principles of long-term development planning, to the degree that they help us identify structural problems and then lay the roadmap for that. The second one has to do with institutional and policy innovations from the preparation of the VNRs that you mentioned. One of them is the highlighting of data. So we move from 66 indicators to 105, but we still think that there's room for more, and so we're actually considering launching a data bootcamp when we return back to Ghana with the Ghana Statistical Service to see how we can augment data both in terms of quantity and quality. Some of the data are available, but we need to dig them out, and this is where perhaps we can apply artificial intelligence to be able to mine data in ways that previously were not possible. We've also been able to mainstream both the SDGs and the Agenda 2063. Unfortunately, the SDGs receive more attention for obvious reasons than the Agenda 2063, and we aim to work on that also. I believe the AU itself can help by giving us maybe a couple of major interventions that the African public would see in terms of the ability to travel freely. For example, if that is done under Agenda 2063, the public will see its relevance and rally around, as opposed to organizing talking shops and so forth. And then the third and last point is really the structure that we've put in place to be able to localize the whole approach. So we have a local economic development strategy based on the principle that the national economy is actually the aggregation of local economies. And so if you want to transform the national economy, you necessarily must begin to transform local economies. In Ghana, we have 261 local economies, and we work with them directly to prepare their plans and to make sure that the key drivers of economic growth transformation, including human resource development, infrastructure development and delivery, are appropriately centered within the framework of the medium-term plan. So these are just the key highlights that I thought I should share with you. As I promised, we'll share the soft copy with you. I've already taken your card. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thompson. There's so much to unpack in what you've said, but I would just particularly highlight some of the aspects that I think are key. And you have emphasized, for example, the efficiency of resource allocation, which is often an underappreciated source of revenue mobilization. So it's not just about raising taxes, it's about looking at where existing resources are going and then being able to then assess how well they are invested and reallocate them when necessary to more productive sectors, linked to this idea of increasing productivity. I love the idea of a data bootcamp, and I think that is absolutely critical for Africa to also be able to make informed decisions on resource mobilization. And I think the points about the 10-year, about the Africa Agenda 2063, and having, in a way, maybe flagships or initiatives that really have a lot of value for citizens that they can feel it, I think is very important, as well as the aggregation of local economies, which allows us, in a way, to move beyond this issue of informality that you've mentioned and, in a way, play a de-risking role. We need to accelerate, so I will now directly go to His Excellency Ambassador Matthias Luemba Jr., the Deputy Permanent Representative from the Permanent Mission of Angola to the United Nations. And Ambassador Luemba, could you let us know if you could comment on the lessons from the first voluntary national review and how they're being incorporated into this year's review process, and what are the key takeaways from your perspective?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, distinguished ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Last week we presented our second voluntary national review, and Angola 2025 VNR was more than a effort. It was a call to action. It's a call for stronger international solidarity and a call for speed up Africa integration. In 2024, we identified, based on our first national review, In 2024, we have identified 7 national accelerators for the SDGs: health, education, social protection, agriculture, climate action, water, and sanitation. These now lead our investment and policies. In health, to give you an example, we reduce maternal and child mortality, life expectancy is improving, expanded health care, and upgraded many infrastructure. In gender equality, we created a gender observatory. Women's participation in leadership and politics is on the rise. The process itself was nationally owned, inclusive, and evidence-based. We basically focus on 3 main pillars. First, strong institutional coordination. The process was led by the Ministry of Economy and Planning and with full engagement from all sectors. Second, broad social and territorial inclusion. Consultation well held involved provinces, youth, women, civil society, private sector, and development partners were fully involved. Third, another important issue was technical assistance and partnership. We worked closely with UN agencies, universities, and technical partners. More than 800 contributions were collected. These have reached the final report and strengthened national ownership. But we also are very mindful of persisting such challenges. For instance, social protection coverage will remain limited. The demand for finance and sustainable development remains high. Therefore, we are strategically investing in national resources to boost productive sectors, so diversify the economy and create more job opportunities, especially for youth and women. Mr. Moderator, we recognize our achievement with realism, with a sense of realism, but we do not lose sight on the challenge we have ahead of us. Our goal is leaving no one behind, and we always be our highest priority to inclusivity. I think, collectively speaking, this is our collective duty to ensure that the development is spread out across the country. It is our responsibility. We today share our experience with humility and conviction, and we know the challenges that we share may be similar to many African countries, and we believe that together as Africans we are strong and we can do it. In the interest of time, maybe I will just share a bit of what we intend as we look for the future, Moderate, we also believe that partnership for Africa development remains central. Later in November, Angola will host the 7th Africa European Union Summit in Rwanda. The summit will deepen cooperation in areas including peace and security, trade, and multilateralism. Also, we believe that adequate and predictable finance is also vital to develop modern infrastructure in Africa. In this regard, President Lorenzo, in his capacity as chairperson of the African Union, has prioritized infrastructure financing as a key element for the regional development to improve infrastructure. Africa faces an annual infrastructure project of about 100 billion. In October, Angola will host Africa's biggest infrastructure summit. This is a part of a broader continental effort to unlock investments and partnership to support the African Union Agenda 2060. Mr. Moderator, in the interest of time, those are the key highlights that my delegation would like to share in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for sharing those details. And also, in the perspective of Angola's current leadership of the African Union, I think this is particularly appreciated as accelerators in terms of what we want to achieve at the continental level. Our last country experience for today will be shared by Mr. Julius Joubert, a senior economist from the National Planning Department in the Ministry of Finance, National Planning and Trade of the Republic of Seychelles. My compatriot, welcome. So, Mr. Joubert, we know that Seychelles is presenting its second Biennale this year. So can you comment on some of the experiences you learned from the first presentation, how peer learning has been beneficial, and how can these lessons and experiences be scaled up to inform the Vienna preparations of other African countries?
Thank you, Mr. Moritz, and very often once again to all the excellencies, delegates, and all partners present. As Moritz hinted to, my intervention will touch more in terms of the peer learning and the partnerships that guided very much the Vienna process and sharing a bit the experience that Seychelles had starting last year at leading us all to our presentation, which was yesterday. And I hope that most of us all were able to be part of our Vienna presentation and take heed of the successes and the challenges that Seychelles, as it sits, has taken stock of during the Vienna process. In terms of the peer learning that Seychelles underwent as part of the Vienna process, I think first and foremost it's imperative for me to thank all your partners, especially from the UN system, more particular from the UNRC office that covers Seychelles and also Mauritius, the Economic Commission for Africa and also ESCAP, who really guided us through the entire Vienna process and provided us the opportunity to have a peer learning experience with countries in the region, such as Uganda, but also more broadly, for example, with the Philippines. And that was a really good experience for us. In terms of partnerships, I think this echoes further the call of SDG 17 that no one can do it alone, especially for the smaller states, island states. This is where the world partnerships contain quite strongly with the UN system, but also more broadly with the global community of other Vienna countries, both in the region and further afield. The Vienna pre-learning exercises provided an opportunity for our technical experts to engage with experts from other countries that have really presented multiple Viennas and larger countries. So they have a bit of a more of a wealth of experience in terms of the consultation, the actual drafting, data collection, and so on. And I would definitely recommend the peer-learning exercises to future Vienna countries as we chart the road to 2030. I'm sure some of us will report at least once before then. The benefits, as I hinted to earlier, in terms of building that a pool of expertise and experience within the national teams that actually guide the Vienna process and report on the SDGs. Maybe in terms of some of the key insights that I really like to share, I think one of the main thrusts that came out from our Vienna presentation yesterday is that in general, countries must learn and build upon the findings and experience of their previous Vienna. And in the case of Seychelles, what we have taken away from the second iteration for our Vienna was that as an island state, we remain vulnerable in terms of economic shocks, climate events, and so on. And now, as we formulated the second Vienna, the 2025 Vienna, we took that in stock, taking into account the context of Seychelles as it is, and the need to reinforce resilience through economic diversification, strengthen partnerships, consolidating our resources, and as I've mentioned earlier, identifying areas where resources can be redeployed to achieve greater efficiency gains. So that was really key. And it's also, in terms of resources, I'll also mention the work that is ongoing in terms of our integrated national financing framework, the INFF, which will also help us to cost our key initiatives like the National Development Strategy, of which the SDGs have been embedded in quite closely. So perhaps in the interest of time as well, I will go towards looking forward as we chart the road ahead to 2030. There'll be another perfect opportunity for countries to take a good, strong look in the mirror. Where are we? Where can we fix things? Where could we like to be, and what are the key actions that need to be taken? And in that light, now that we are at the stage of VNRs, and I congratulate all countries that have presented and will present, now come to the post-launch phase of the VNR. And this is also the area where we would welcome input and support for all partners, especially for the UN system, the SDGs. But also more broadly, I would even say in terms of Agenda 2063, and as we know, there's widely overlap between the 2063 agenda and the 2030 agenda. So it's a perfect time now I'll be able to go with the implementation of our plans. So perhaps in the interest of time, I will stop here, and I will also congratulate all countries who have presented, and I will also make my departure, as they call. Seychelles is quite far from here, and I will be leaving so that I can reach and depart at the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those experiences. And we have a final speaker in this session who is the representative of Africa's youth. We'll be hearing from Mr. Bora Kamwanye, the Vice President of Diaspora from the Pan-African Youth Union. Unfortunately, because of time, we will not be able to open the floor, but I would like to mention that OSA, the United Nations Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, is preparing substantive fact sheets and also information around VNRs on our website, including key messages and full reports. So people who are listening and would like to contribute, you can feel free to send us an email with the email address, which is based on our website, and we will incorporate that into our work. There may be a chance in the next session to also have some discussions, but unfortunately we have to move on in the interest of time. So before I close this session, I'd like to invite Mr. Bora Kamwanye, Vice President Diaspora from Pan-African Youth Union. We've heard a lot about how African youth can really lead sustainable development on the continent, and that Africa's youth are a powerful force for innovation, entrepreneurship, and social change. So what are the key investments and policy shifts that you see are critical to unlock the full potential of young people across the continent?
Thank you very much. Of course, for this first point, I'd like to refer to the call to action from this declaration at the 11th Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. So on April 8th, 2025 in Kampala, youth delegates and stakeholders participated in the Children and Youth Forum ahead of the 11th session of the ARFSD, and the theme Youth, Job Creation and the Realization of Sustainable Development Goals in Africa. And this declaration includes a call to action which addresses points on youth unemployment, and there we are asking for more investment in science and technology. We ask for inclusivity and especially investing more in educating girls and ensuring that social parameters permit them to stay in school. We ask for aligned education and employment policies with the realities of young people. And also we ask for mainstream technical and vocational education and trainings and dual education models. Of course, we also ask for a boost in access to training in skills that are relevant to the labor markets of today and tomorrow. On financing of youth-led innovation and entrepreneurship, we ask that government scale up investment in youth innovations and startups. We ask that we mobilize more multi-stakeholders support for youth entrepreneurship. And we also ask for the establishment of a youth fund and the Geo-African Continental Free Trade Area, and creates regional innovation hubs and platforms. And on mechanism to keep our youth on the continent protected. We ask for the development of youth-sensitive, universal social protection systems. We ask for scale programs for marginal youth
But also, we ask for more investment in affordable and accessible childcare. We should also recognize that youth engagement in national and local policy must move beyond consultation to co-creation in order to enable young people to shape the decision that affects their lives and their future. And regarding how does this come in the context of VNR and VLR? Well, to support and advance this call to action, voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews can serve as critical levers for implementation, accountability, and youth empowerment across multiple fronts. And a few key points here. One, translating the call to action into measurable commitment. Here we can track investment in youth employment, innovation hubs, and entrepreneurship funds. We can monitor progress in formalizing the informal economy and scaling youth-focused social protection systems. We can evaluate the efforts in reforming education system, including the uptake on AI and digital skills, and of course, TVET. An example I could give you, of course, is we could include indicators on a number of youth-led startups supported, digital training programs delivered, and youth participation in national plans. Number two, institutionalizing youth participation in development planning. VNRs and VLRs can institutional co-creation with youth. We can ensure that young people are not just consulted, but actively contribute the review process, identifying the gaps, proposing solutions, validating findings. We can also showcase the youth-led data platform, share the records, and maybe offer alternative assessment. And of course, here as an example, countries can integrate youth voices chapters into the VNRs or support youth-produced VNRs in local communities. Number three, strengthening youth-responsive data and accountability. VNRs and VLRs are ideal platforms for age-disaggregated data collection and analysis. They can incorporate youth-led monitoring tools, including surveys, community scorecards, and open data dashboard. Promoting partnership and multi-stakeholders collaboration. VNRs and VLRs can document multi-sectoral partnerships, aligning with the call to foster collaboration between governments, private sector, academia, and the civil society. They help identify and scale promising local initiatives and diaspora-supported youth programs. Last but not least, mainstreaming climate action and digital inclusion. VNRs and VLRs can assess how well climate financing and digital policy are aligned with youth needs and reality, and this is very important. They can push for inclusive green jobs and affordable digital access through locally verified data and community engagement. To conclude, these are not just reports. They are accountability instruments and platforms for transformative actions. When embedded with youth perspective and backed by evidence, they can ensure the call to action is not just aspirational, but is operationalized, catalyze systemic change through inclusive policymaking, evidence-based tracking, and community engagement. So we call upon the African Union, entities of the United Nations system, local and national governments, the private sector, civil society organizations to adopt and implement initiatives in the following areas: transformative agenda for financing youth-led innovation and entrepreneurship, reshaping of education and learning for the future of work, youth inclusion in governance for enhanced coherence and accountability, and of course, strengthening of social protection and economic. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, these were the message from the youth of Africa and the diaspora. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Mr. Bora Kamwanye, and thank you to all our panelists, and we have concluded this session.